Hello and welcome to ThePrint. I'm Zoya, and in our Great Speeches series this week, we look at a key address by B.R. Shenoy from 1957. As India's most prominent classical liberal economist and a fierce critic of state planning, Shenoy delivered this speech on My Idea of a Welfare State at Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan in Bombay at an important moment in India's economic history. The second five-year plan was underway. Nehru's socialist vision was taking shape, and debates about the role of the state in economic development were at their peak. Why revisit this speech now? With today's discussions about the welfare state, universal basic income, and the so-called freebies, Shenoy's philosophical framework offers a radically different perspective rooted in Indian tradition and individual liberty. Shenoy began by challenging the very foundation of contemporary welfare state thinking. While most economists focused on material well-being and consumption standards, Shenoy argued that any meaningful discussion of welfare must first address a fundamental question about human existence itself. He said, human well-being is inseparably bound up with the immediate and the ultimate purpose of human existence. We cannot escape the question, what are we here for? Are we here to worship on the altar of man's standard of living? End quote. To answer this, Shenoy turned to Gandhi, whom he considered always a good and safe guide in these matters. Gandhi had explicitly stated his life's purpose in his autobiography. Shenoy, quoting Gandhi, said, "What I want to achieve, what I have been striving and pining to achieve these 30 years is self-realization, to attain moksha. I live and move and have my being in pursuit of this goal. All that I do by way of speaking and writing and all my ventures in the political field are directed to this same end." End quote. This wasn't mere philosophical speculation for Shenoy. He argued that India's traditional understanding of life's purpose had practical implications for how the state should function. Human activities, he explained, fell into two broad categories: Arthik activities or wealth acquisition, and Kamic activities or want satisfaction. But both had to be grounded in dharma to serve the ultimate goal of moksha. Where did the state fit into this framework? Shenoy was clear about the boundaries. He said, "It is obvious that the state has no jurisdiction over the inner changes leading to self-realization, nirvana. But the remaining three, dharma, artha and kama, the three vargas, fall within its purview." End quote. This led Shenoy to a radical conclusion about sovereignty that directly challenged Western democratic theory. In the Indian conception, he argued, sovereignty didn't rest with the people. He said, "It is significant that under Indian polity, sovereignty lay not in the people but in dharma. The concern of the executive wing of the state, the king and his ministers, was to ensure that the rule of the sovereign dharma prevailed." End quote. What did this mean for economic policy? Shenoy argued that the rule of dharma imposed strict limits on state intervention in the economy. He said, "It follows that under the Indian concept of a welfare state, each individual must be left free to pursue his lawfully chosen vocation. Free enterprise, subject only to the rule of dharma, is an essential feature of the economic setup of the welfare state." End quote. The state, according to Shenoy, could only enter economic activity in very limited circumstances. Public utilities, basic industries that the private sector couldn't undertake, strategic defense industries, and basic developmental needs. Crucially, he argued that even if the state could produce more efficiently than private enterprise, dharma would still prohibit such intervention. This philosophy led Shenoy to embrace what he called the minimum state ideal. He said, "This suggests that the Indian concept of a welfare state was a minimum state. It was wholly antagonistic to a garrison police state. The latter rests on violence and adharma. Under it, the individual is coerced into yielding to the will of the state." End quote. Shenoy wasn't entirely opposed to social safety nets. He acknowledged that providing relief from abject poverty, which causes starvation or such suffering, was a legitimate state responsibility. But he drew a sharp line against what he saw as excessive welfare provision. He posed a pointed question. Will it be the responsibility of the state to provide the more unfortunate families of the nuclear age with motor cars, at least scooters, washing machines, refrigerators, telephones, television and radio sets and the like? End quote. The answer for him was clearly no. Such vulgar charity would violate the principles of dharma and create unsustainable fiscal burdens. Shenoy then turned to what he saw as the greatest threat to Indian welfare: the temptation of rapid economic development through authoritarian means. He had witnessed the Soviet model's apparent success and saw Indian planners being seduced by its promise of accelerated growth. He said, "Communist experience has shown that it is possible to accelerate the pace of progress by an expansion of the public sector to cover the entire economy. According to official statistics, the rate of increase in national income of communist economies varies between 12 to 16% per year." End quote. But Shenoy saw this as a devil's bargain. The apparent efficiency came at the cost of fundamental freedoms. He warned, but to take recourse to this device would be to sacrifice freedom for speed in economic progress. For the changed conditions will no longer permit free enterprise, a free pricing system, free markets, and what is most diabolical, freedom of choice of one's own occupation. End quote. Shenoy was particularly concerned about the influence of communist advisors in India's planning process. He said, "In the formulation of the second plan, we have availed of the advice of technicians subscribing to the communist philosophy of life. We are not without Marxists in the administration and among our advisors." End quote. In his conclusion, Shenoy returned to Gandhi's wisdom about the ideal state. He said, quoting Gandhi, that state is perfect and non-violent where the people are governed the least. End quote. Shenoy's final warning was prophetic. Pursuing material welfare while ignoring dharma would ultimately defeat the very purpose of human existence. He said, "What use is that welfare which ignores the true goal of human life and sets aside the elevating rule of dharma? A welfare state which aims solely at artha and kama, suppressing dharma or leaving it out in the cold, that is devoid of true welfare." End quote. B.R. Shenoy's 1957 address remains one of the most philosophically grounded critiques of the modern welfare state. As contemporary debates about welfare, economic growth, and state power continue, Shenoy's speech reminds us that true welfare cannot be separated from human dignity and spiritual fulfillment. Thank you for joining us on Great Speeches. For more from The Print, become a subscriber at theprint.in/subscribe. I'm Zoya in Delhi. Tune in every day for more such news and analysis.